neder now. I'm going to make a vow. I'm going to make a vow now, and I promise that at the end of this year, either one of you will teach, or there will be someone else, and we will start learning and knowing what does it mean to be an Ethiopian Jew. And we did it, and we recruited Sharon Shalom, who was the first Ethiopian man who has his doctorate in Jewish studies. And in fact, his book, Misinai L'Ethiopia, From Sinai to Ethiopia, was named after my Abba's book, Misinai L'Tzion. And he wrote sort of like a guide to the perplexed Ethiopian youth. Because as they came to Israel, their heritage, their past, was basically wiped out. It was basically, okay, it kept you together, it's nice. We don't have to, there's nothing for us to learn from it. We should have one day a year, some kind of celebration of Ethiopian customs, and then, come on, you be like us. The whole notion of integrating as basically saying, you're welcome if you become like we. And so I read the book. I'm engaged in trying to figure out and trying to teach how do we navigate together a past, present, and future when things really were very, very different. And I sort of, one of my prayers is always to do this kind of prayer together. A group of us is, you know, we ask God and each other to please help us to have a little more imagination, because we don't have a blueprint. We don't have a blueprint, but so often when we don't have a blueprint, we force something because we know about it, we recognize it. And really, this is one of the, for me, one of the deep, challenging notions when I teach Jewish studies now, is I ask, who is in the canon? Who are we teaching? As a result of understanding even deeper, the gender thing was my whole, you know, I grew up always studying texts and feeling I wasn't really invited. And studying gender studies gave me a framework to understand how lonely I was and that I wasn't crazy. You know, as you know, the definition of insanity is when you think you're the only sane person. And so I was sure I wasn't crazy. And so gender studies did help me in that. But it also helped me formulate the question, who is not here? And how do we go ahead together, acknowledging that someone else is not here? So that is one of the things that I've learned and I'm trying to do. And maybe I'll tell a short story, another one, or?
I want you to. About your Haredi students?
Yeah.
Please.
Okay.
And not just the women, but the men, correct?
Definitely. We've opened up a Haredi campus, and that is one of the notions of how do we make higher education accessible to those who didn't have a higher education before. The Haredi community, the ultra-Orthodox community, really did not have access to higher education. So we opened up campuses where the men and the women study separately. And there was, we had a law school and a business school. And then when I came into opening up an education, they are coming to study education with us. The people who are coming are the rabbis in the core of Mea Sha'arim. They're like in the Talmud Torahs and the women in the Beis Yaakov. First, I just would like to say that I have been ostracized from most of my feminist sisters who feel that I betrayed the cause because I'm very supportive of their education. And even though it's segregated, I just tell them I will teach anybody, anywhere. And so if this is their way to come, then I say welcome. But so the men, I never went to the men's classes because I happen to be that other gender. And they were studying, and they were studying texts that were difficult for them. In law school, you have to do this. In the business school, we have a curriculum. But in education, there's a lot of things that one can choose and one cannot choose. And there's things that are not, you don't find it in the Gemara. And they were having a lot of difficulty. They were feeling, they didn't know what to do with the texts. They were angry, they were frustrated, they were going to quit, they're coming back. And like everything is always a big to-do. And so they said, okay, what are we going to do? Okay, we have to call the dean. It's okay, she'll come. And a part of me, they were kvetching and prefacing for so long and making trouble, like in my heart, my heart became closed. I was angry. I was going to come and be a big Uber Chacham, and I was going to show them. I was going to bring the 3 Talmudic texts that are totally pornography, and they're not going to tell me they can't study Freud. I mean, I had come with that kind of attitude. But as I came to the class, as I was walking, I just had to remind myself, Tov, why are we doing this? Why are you doing it? You're at this point, you need to fight with them. Try to listen to them. So I walk into the class, the representative of the students, there were 70 men, greeted me, and it was the first time in my life that I went into a room where everybody was like this. The whole class. Nobody would pick up. The representative had everybody's complaints and was starting, answer them, answer them, answer them. And I was able, to overcome some of my antagonism, even though I knew I wanted them to study, but it wasn't that easy for me. And really hear what was so hard for them. And then I really could answer them where they were at. And I was able to say, as the dean, I decide the curriculum. And there's a reason why we're studying these things. And it's not because I want you to be secular. I want you to be more Haredi, but I want you to be better teachers. I want you to be able to note if someone went through a trauma and have the skills to deal with it. I want you to know about learning disabilities. So these poor little kids who have these shpilkas that they can't sit, they're not bad boys. There's ways to deal with them. There's ways to hear them. And I was talking for about 15 minutes or so, and slowly, I saw different people sitting up, and they were listening. Not everybody sat up, but a lot were sat up. And then I said to them, it's not enough for me that you finish your BA. I want you to stay with us and go on for your MA, and I want you to come and register. And when I left the class, I just had to go somewhere, and then when I came back to my office, 40 men were standing to sign up for their MA, and now there's a group of 10 men who are studying with me quietly, the grandson of this, these Rabbis here and these Rabbis there, and they're preparing themselves to go on for their doctorate. And again, not to teach at Hebrew U, but to go back and work in their communities. And that is nice.
And when they come to your office, do they?
No.
Hear that? When the gentlemen come to Tova's office, they don't cover their face. That's the best definition I know of a changed relationship. Your turn. Any questions for Tova and Rachel? What we'll take 2 or 3 at a time. Aryeh.
Thank you. Rachel, could you elaborate on your first answer about Rabbi Akiva, not what he was thinking about leaving his wife, because we can't know that, but more about the politics that you referred to and the times?
Okay, so we'll take a couple of other questions, and If it's okay, I'll have both answer. If they wish, they may not want to. I saw another hand. Yes, sir.
The Jewish people, with or without a land, are we a nation, Jonathan Sachs? And if someone from a leading conservative, or reform, would like to answer, that's welcome as well. Are we a divided people if we have a different answer? And the question is in opposition to the globalist movement today.
Okay.
Nationwide.
Let's take one other question for the moment, if there is. Anybody? Did I miss? Yes, Rabbi Schachter, Shalom Schachter.
So is there a future for liberal Judaism and liberal religious Judaism in Israel, given the continuing indifference of the secular in Israel and the growing rigidity of the conservative, both religious conservative and the conservative social elements in Israel?
So, Akiva, Jews and the land, and is there a future for liberal, non-Orthodox Jewry in Israel? Do I have that right?
Yeah.
Who wants to go first?
For all three, or just?
You can choose whichever you want.
Okay. So I'd love to answer the Rabbi Akiva question, but I also want to address, if I can, the Jewish people question. Because I think that in today's world, I don't think we understand what Jewish people means. I don't think we get it. I don't think we can define it. I don't think we would know the parameters of it. I think that we are challenged by peoplehood in ways that I don't think has ever happened before in our history. I know that there's questions of Israel and diaspora Jews that always gets asked, and the question of do Israelis consider themselves part of the Jewish people, and do we consider Israelis part of the Jewish people? And to even begin to answer that, I don't know that we could answer what are the Jewish people. I think that we are still very much healing from the Holocaust. We are still very much trying to find foundations and definitions and parameters for that. And I think that we are so internally struggling with peoplehood. And what does that mean? Beyond denominational Judaism, because we're not even sure what that means. And the way I know we don't know is because of our kids. Our kids are at the point where they've coined a phrase called post-denominational Judaism. And they're post something we didn't even know we had. And suddenly they're past it. And they're saying, I don't want that anymore, stop giving that to me. I can't find myself there. I'm post-denominational Judaism, and that's the next thing coming. And we're just playing the catch-up. And so the question of the Jewish people, and what does that mean? And how do we answer that personally, and how do we answer that in our communities? And how do our leaders answer that? And can they teach us what that is? Because we're going by definitions that always change when history hit, and Jews had to once again redefine and understand what does peoplehood mean. And I think that before we get to the question of the land or not the land and the complexities of the land, I think we're still wading through the complexities of peoplehood. And what honestly does that mean to us? And that, I think, is in my opinion, one of the top items for the Jewish people to address is this question of peoplehood. Because everything else we're asking is stemming off of that. There are people who would have loved to come to tonight, but their communities will not look kindly on their coming into a synagogue that is not part of their community. and therefore they won't come. And to me, that's a question of peoplehood. And when Tova mentioned earlier about Hillel and Shammai, and yet they always found a way to marry each other, and they always found a way to eat together. And then the Talmud goes on to say, because they disclosed, because they understood what was important to them. And so they would disclose to them, and they would say to them, by your definition, you might want to be cautious with these two young people getting to know each other. By your definition, you might want to use these utensils, not these utensils. Because there was a sense of trust and peoplehood beyond the fear of judgment and beyond the fear of being excluded. And I think oftentimes we're trapped there, and we must start having discussions of peoplehood, in my opinion.
Thank you, Rachel. Tova.
I think that the Jews have overdosed on who doesn't belong. I think it would probably be a healthy idea for perhaps maybe 20 years, we just put a moratorium on who doesn't belong and just say welcome for a little while. The issue of the land, I'll stay on that first question and then we could go on more. On the issue of the land, I think the land is very, or has been central for Jewish identity, even if it wasn't the central issue at all times. But I think that the way in which we've understood our relationship to the land was very much and has been very much influenced by the biblical ethos of a zero-sum game. And I think that that's probably, and that is often what the land unleashes, our biblical land, is this sense that if you think it could be yours, then it can't be mine. And I think that we, even subconsciously, but I think throughout the ages, I think that we have suffered, and what I would call this would be the original sin of our matriarchs. Often we say that Eve was the original sinner as she seduced her husband into sin. She didn't do anything, she shared. She ate something, she thought it was good, and she shared. The original sin is in our matriarchs. It was Sarah, who could not fathom loving two children. And it was Rebecca, who also couldn't fathom two children. And when Esau comes back and realizes that his father blessed his brother first, he asks his father, "Father, do you have but one blessing?" And his father cries and does a little kind of mini blessing. But that ethos of there can really be only one, and one's love is always opposed to the other, I think is one of the biggest curses that is related to that biblical land. And I think that one of the challenges of Jewish peoplehood today is to see, is there any way we can get beyond that way of thinking about the land, the different people in it, and how that may have influenced the way we see ourselves as a people. I mean, there's other questions. Do you want to relate to the other questions?
I want to know what you're reading. What you're, not that, not your notes. I want to know what you're reading. I want to know, is there a book or two you've read in the last, whatever year, that inspired you and you recommend to others? Maybe it changed you a little bit, or it's changed others.
I'm going first.
Please.
Cormac McCarthy's The Road. I could not believe that book. I don't like the other stuff he's written. I have to say. And I usually don't read a book, I read authors. So if there's a book I like, I'll read everything the author wrote, because I want to get a sense of the author. I did not like the other stuff he wrote.
Why do you like it?
Because it's about redemption. And it's about redemption over and over and over again. And it's about the redemption found between a father and his son, and how each redeems the other over and over and over again when the world has ceased to exist. Can you find redemption when the world has ceased to exist? There's a midrash that talks about God comes to have a chit-chat with Avram. And Avram says to God, "Where have you been? What have you been doing?" And God has said, "I've searched the world entire to find the seeds of the Messiah, and I finally found them." And Avram says, "Where did you find them?" And God said, "They lie in stone." And we know that, in fact, in Sodom and Gomorrah is where Lot and his daughters were, and the horrible story of what went on there, the horrible story about Lot and his daughters, when Lot offers his daughters up to a gang rape situation, only later to have his daughters rape him because they think that they're alone in the world, and so they get their father drunk to perpetuate humanity through him. And it's horrible no matter which way you look at it. And yet, from that act, one of those daughters will have a son she names Moav, from my father, Moav, who will give us Ruth, who will give us David, who will give us the Messiah. And so the seeds of redemption do in fact lie in the horrors of stone. And it begins that ancient question of, can you find redemption in the worst possible places? The stories we hear of some things that went on in the concentration camps, the stories we hear of horrible human nightmares, and those little seeds of redemption. And when I read the book, The Road, I was shocked that it was a depiction of that midrash over and over and over again. And it really challenged.
Consciously so, on McCormick's part?
So you're asking a question about authorial intent, and
No, I'm
that's
just
another
asking.
age-old question.
I'm just asking you, did he know what he was doing?
I don't care.
Okay. No, I'm not saying that. I just want to know.
Yeah, no, I don't know.
It doesn't matter.
But you know
I agree
what?
with you, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter,
Right.
but the language he used, I think he did, because the father turns to the son at one moment and says to his son, "You are my warrant." And you cannot write that and not know that that's a redemptive moment.
So it's in his intellectual library to one extent or another.
Yeah, I think that book just...
I now want to read that book.
Tova. It's a hard book to read, I have to say. It's
I agree.
very angsty. But
I used to be a better reader, but go ahead, Tova. It's the digital reading that does you in, right?
One of the books, and it comes to the question that you've asked, that I read over and over again, is a book by Daphne Hampson called Theology and Feminism. Daphne is a religious Anglican woman who teaches then in England, and for 10 years she taught theology to those who are going to become priests, and for 10 years she begs to be accepted, also to be ordained. And every year she was refused. And she wrote probably, I think, the best critique of liberal Judaism, of liberal Christianity. And her claim, I think she's the one who I think critiques me the most for everything I do. And I'm always talking to her, because basically what she's saying is that if you have intellectual and moral integrity, Christianity, and in some way Judaism, are religions that are fundamentalist. All of this sweet reinterpreting them is a lie, ultimately. And that you can't take Jesus out of Christianity, and with all what that means, and every one of you can think of who the Jesus is in the Jewish tradition, if not only Jesus himself. And it's a book that, if any of you have gone through a period of trying to get things to be changed, you go back again and again, which is part of how I lived for many years, trying to change Orthodox Judaism. And it's very compelling. It's very, you get what it is that she's saying, and you really cry with her. You can't, I mean, I'm sure some people read it without crying, but I would read her over and over and over again. And then, her next book is the saddest book that there is. Because her next book is called After Christianity. And she tries to create a new religion ex nihilo. Just based on, on trying not from biblical sources, but from, nature and all sorts of things that are out there in the world. And as deep as her criticism is, in some way, and I don't want to sound critical, so I don't know how to say it better, but the next book, After Christianity, is so thin. Walking away and trying to create a wellspring created a vacuum. So when you're asking, and I'll just get to that, is there a future for liberal Judaism? There is a future for liberal Judaism. There has to be a future for liberal Judaism if we care about the Jewish tradition. And as long as we're asking and we're creating it, then it will be.
Tova, maybe I heard you wrong.
The first book?
I beg your pardon?
The name of the first book is?
Theology and Feminism.
Theology and Feminism. Maybe I heard you wrong, but I thought in the first part of your answer you were saying, I guess quoting the author, that if we think that there's something substantive and maybe authentic to the Judaism that was created since the tradition itself began to fall apart, unravel with modernity, we might be fooling ourselves. Did I hear you wrong? I might have.
I don't know, maybe I wasn't clear, and it's not that you may have heard me wrong.
But so you're,
what I'm
to
saying,
Sholom's question, you're saying, yes, there is a future to liberal Judaism, and you've said, because there has to be.
more than
Can you give us a better answer?
Well, I think that we are all, or some of us, are walking testimonies to a present and a future of liberal Judaism. I mean, it's not only, if I may quote something that I did learn from my Abba, and that was that he used to say that the Judaism has within it the self-correcting mechanisms to deal with the ethical, political challenges that are there. And so what I would say is that fundamentalist Judaism, the Judaism of camps, of those who hate each other, who are disrespectful, is part of the Jewish tradition. I don't like it when people say, oh, that's not really Judaism. That is Judaism. We have to look at it, and we have to cry with it, and we have to say, how do we change it? But acting as though ugly parts in our lives don't exist is not, I don't think it's prudent educationally. I don't think it's the way to go. I think there really are many ways to be Jewish, and one of them is one that we may not find that attractive, which is, as you were saying, that people from one community can't even walk into the shul because, so there is a Jewish way that does that. From, as I said, from the zero-sum game till now, there's many different variations of that theme, and it's something that we have to call and say, how do we re-engage with that? Do we ignore it? Do we feel that there's sometimes we can also say, you know what, that's beyond an argument. I don't even want to engage in that. There's other times we say, it is too prevalent. let's try to show another way, another Jewish way to be. So I think that liberal Judaism is alive, not only in the United States and Canada, it is very alive in Israel. It's fighting sometimes different battles, sometimes it moves sideways. It is not reflected in the political makeup of our country. But it is alive, and I hope that it will grow. And I hope that all of us who want to do things...
So would you say that, like Neshama Karabach, you're now a Reformed Jew? I actually mean it in a serious way.
No, I'm not a Reformed Jew.
I know.
I'm not a Reformed Jew, but I don't... you know, I'm...
But you obviously respect all forms of Judaism.
I think that I try to bring my girls up that in every shul there's kedusha, there's holiness. And I took them and we went to shul. We even go to Baptist church on Sundays when we're in the state. God does exist, and it's up to us to find that God. So that, do I think that Reformed Judaism is wrong? Just because I'm not Reformed doesn't mean that it's wrong. It's just, it's not who I was.
You gave, and Rachael has indicated much the same, a great answer. In effect, where there is God and where people meet God, there can be religious sensibility. Is that a fair way to?
I think if I had to boil it down, I would say we're not doing Jewish right if we're not hearing 600,000 different things from Torah. If we are not hearing that many diverse truths, then we're not doing it right. And remember that, and the Talmud has said this to us over and over and over again, it is all coming from Torah. People aren't making stuff up. It is something that their souls are connecting with and responding with. And we need to be hearing it because otherwise we're not doing this right. So it's not about shutting down the other voice. It's not about inviting the other voice. It's about insisting that there be another voice. And then teaching people how to express that voice. Because it's not that it's good for you to express it, it's good for me that you express it. I need for you to express it. And I need you to express the voice that isn't mine. So we're not doing it right if we don't do it.
One of the things I respect greatly about both of you is that you each know how to listen. And I think it's informed your religious worldview for each one of you, probably in different ways. Let me move back to you. Are there any other questions that on your mind for Tova?
Can I answer the Rabbi Akiva thing for a minute, though?
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel.